for Monday, March 19th, 2018 to order. We have a quorum and the agenda was properly
Yes.
posted. All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, item 4, is public appearances. This is public's opportunity to speak about any subject that's not a specific agenda item. You have nothing tonight?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Item 5 is discuss and consider the minutes of the regular village board meeting from March 5th. Any comments, corrections, additions? John?
Just that one correction underneath my report. Starts at the bottom of letter E there, on top of page 2. They're not looking to turn the high school into a middle school. So 8 to 10 years, they're looking to expand for a potential increase of 250 students.
Okay.
So right now, there's no discussion about turning the current high school into a middle school.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, if not, is there a motion to approve with the correction?
I'll make a motion to approve that with the correction as John indicated.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second to approve with the correction from John Russell. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. New business, discuss and consider new operator's license for licensing year July 2017 to June 2018 for Dylan Milan, if I got that right. Chief, any issues with that person?
No, good to go.
Okay. All right, I'll make a motion to approve the licensing, operator's license for Dylan Milhan.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to approve. Any other discussion? Not all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. 6B, discuss and consider setting a meeting date for joint meeting with the town board and identify potential agenda items for said meeting. I guess as far as a meeting date, we could, I'm trying to think what doesn't conflict with ours, but we could do Monday, which would, I think there's 5 Mondays, is it 5 Mondays in April?
There is.
There is,
Yes.
okay, so like April 30th, or I don't think we have anything on, as far as I know, April 9th, is that right?
CDA.
CDA, okay, we have CDA at 5:30? Is it possible it might be done by 6:30? Just as an alternate date, you think?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
move right through the agenda.
We usually are done by 6:30 or 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, would April 30th work for everybody, since that's not going to conflict with anything?
Yep.
Yeah, we do have a landfill meeting that night, but those are pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
Because they moved it from the 4th to the 5th because I think it conflicts with Steve's some sort of training for
That's at 6:30.
6:30.
Okay,
We could shoot for 7.
10 minutes.
okay, we could do 7 o'clock as well. I mean, it's fine with me,
Longer than 5 minutes.
We do 6:45 too.
I mean, I think everybody has the email from Town Chair Chris Hampton about the 4 subjects that he identified, but part of this would be setting potential agenda items and goals for this meeting too. And one of the things that I have not received yet from Chris, but I'll ask him yet, is what his desired outcome is for his goals, and if everybody's aware of what he has, is there anything else that we would like to see as far as our agenda on there, because I don't have anything else that I'm remembering, but
Those 4 goals, again, I don't know if I.
one was a shared community park, and I can never remember the name of it.
Elmargo.
Elmargo.
Yep.
Another thing that you
Jack,
mentioned,
where is that?
It's off of Bus Road, I think. and
yeah,
some of the
that like
land is
is that
annexed.
American Way, or is that,
Oh, down there.
Sean looked it up. I don't know. Did he want to?
That's near the Helkland property that was annexed
okay.
off gas.
And then another subject he had was police operations in the township and village, and as far as I know, when I've talked with Chief Labor, there's not been any issues, so I'm not sure what he wants to discuss, so I'm gonna get more detail from him. There was a subject about annexations, which we can certainly go over where we're at with them, and I guess what our policy and procedure is. And I cannot remember what the other one was.
Roads and streets, maybe?
Maybe it was.
He had mentioned that at the landfill meeting,
No.
which might be a pretty good topic if we're talking annexations and some of the
Okay.
topics that we have tonight, just with violence road traffic and things of that nature.
Okay. So I guess at this point, if Monday, April 30th works at 7 o'clock to let you get through the landfill meeting, we have those agenda items, and is there anything else that anybody would want to put on there at this point? I mean, we have plenty of time, obviously, to notice it, but I guess if you do, let myself and Lisa know, and we'll go from there.
That should be enough to keep us busy.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see where it goes, and I guess we would invite them to come here just for the sake of having it on television or whatever. I mean, they don't have the ability, well, unless our cable guy wants to go down there, I guess, but it might be easier just to invite them up here.
Sure.
And we've done it here before, we just add more tables.
And then we could maybe propose the landfill meeting be here, so we're not driving by.
Yeah. that'd be good. Okay. All right, so I guess at this point then, the motion would be, I'll make a motion then to offer them a potential meeting date of Monday, April 30th at 7 PM at Village Hall after the landfill meeting. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Monday, the 30th at 7 PM. All right. Okay, moving on. We have reports from village boards, commissions, and committees, public works and properties.
That'd be me. So, we covered an update on School Road and Highway N. Still looking for that to be finished. Looked like the parts were in, but we just had to schedule the installation. And I don't know, I haven't noticed it, but that's probably why I didn't notice it. Well, at least that checks that box at least. Then we also had just a brief discussion of the bike path and just indicated that the ad hoc group meeting had been set and we're moving ahead, and that's actually tomorrow night for their first meeting. And then a bulk of the meeting was discussing the Parkside Ridge preliminary plat and walking through the various scenarios there. And you know, is Mike tucked away here somewhere? Mike had a number of comments, feedback to the plat, and provided that right to Mr. Olson. So, and that's on the agenda tonight. So I think we're going to cover that in due time. And then we had the engineer and director's report and set the next meeting for April 3rd. JJ, anything else that you want to? All right.
All right. Okay. All right. So we got emergency government. Troy is not here. Was somebody else at that meeting?
Yeah, I was at the meeting.
Okay.
We were given a very thorough rundown on the system that's used to, you know, for emergencies and to be able to track what's being discussed, what's being done out in the field.
Okay.
That was very, very good. And then we, discussed maybe possibly in the future doing a mock emergency where you have a school bus dump truck incident or something like that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Good. All right, thank you. All right, 7 dash, or 7.3 rather, Community Development Authority. Mick, I'll let you talk about, or I guess, John, you can talk about it too, the TID district potential creation and reallocation of funds.
Yeah, so Mick, you can fill in after I cover the highlights. So the discussion there, and there's a number of attachments to the agenda, was the creation of 2 new TIDs TID 8, TID 9, one being an overlay of the property across the street from the Village Hall here, which that TID is actually coming to its life's end and really not doing much for anything as far as development. The other being down by the CBS area on Cottage Grove Road, and that is to spur development down there. The property, it's flat land, has been vacant for over a dozen years, and we've had no or little to no activity on that. That TID would also include some of the housing development that's going to go behind it, which will actually support at least getting that one off the ground. And then the other one we discussed was Northland, which is north of the interstate. That had already been approved to move forward by the board as far as within the budget. What we're looking at here is to reallocate budget funds for the urban service area for that TID, as well as annexation that was approved in the budget to support TIDs 8 and 9. And then we need to come up with another $5,000 in order to cover that. And then Mick, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
Are we having a public hearing on that tonight?
This is just an update on your report, so I guess a public hearing, I think procedurally, the next step would be Plan Commission? Is that?
We've already discussed it at Plan Commission, so I think tonight we were planning on having action on this to
Okay.
ask the board to move forward on the on TID on two of the TIDs. We already have the one that the board approved, and to allocate $5,000 of additional funds for the use of setting up the 3 TIDs, and the remainder of the money for the new 2 other TIDs would be coming from funds that would be allocated from the new TID that we were putting in place or planned to put in place and budgeted for last year out at Northland. So what would happen there is that property would still be set up and be included in a TID. We had also, though, for that development out there, had allocated funds to annex in some additional property from an owner who had shown a lack of interest in paying for it, which is typically the person that wants to be annexed in would pay the fees for that. And then also we were looking at getting through MadRep, which is a regional group that brings a lot of projects to Aaron and to Matt to look at. We were looking at getting what's known, I think, as a Gold Star certification, so that if someone is wanting to move forward, they can move forward right away with it, showing that we had the environmental review and some different things like that done. So that piece of it also would not be included, so the money that would have been spent on the annexation and on the Gold Star would be moved over to be allocated along with an additional amount of $5,000 for these 2 TIDs. What's driving this is that we need to have these in place by the end of July, according to Ellers, which is the group that we look to for advice on how we're setting up TIDs and how we handle them. And that's basically being driven by the amount of increment that we can actually have as a basis in the city, and when the new project we have out at 94, when that comes in, it could put us over with Summit, could put us over there now. So this is a kind of a critical time for us to be bringing forward if we want to do them. On Northland, so if we have a project that comes forward for Northland and the owners of the properties out there want to do it, we still could move very quickly to get that through CARC to get it into the urban, that's in the urban service area amendment. We wouldn't be doing that either. But we could move very quickly. I think, Aaron, within probably 3 months, 4 months, we could get that approved. So we didn't think that would really, at CDA, would really slow it down in that process. So I think it really comes down to whether Matt can find $5,000 in the budget for us to use for that. I think this is a real opportunity. If we bring in the property down on Cottage Grove Road, the property the property that Homburg has down there. Andrew Homburg said he would be open to having the residential 18 lots come in. If that occurs, that could have some significant cash flow to this new TID. He would not be getting a dime out of that. It would just come in and it would add additional tax revenue. My back of the envelope on that, if he would just sell the lots off there, probably be at least $30,000 a year. If they developed it out, for housing there, we could be looking maybe $130,000 a year that would be coming in. So I think this $5,000 that would be spent will be recouped very, very quickly if we decide to go that route.
Well, thank you for doing that. I mean, I agree with the overlay, Ted, and especially with this one coming to the end and the potential for new, it makes sense to me. There's a link in your packet with the boundaries. Everybody comfortable with that and kind of see where the plans are?
Yeah.
Right, Matt, any thoughts on, I mean, I don't think $5,000 would be a terrible.
Well, so budget-wise, although it is in the budget, it was budgeted to come out of reserves, meaning we were already planning to go 47,000 as a deficit this year and take that money out of reserves.
Okay.
So worst case scenario, it would end up being about 52,000. But come the end of the year, we just have departments pull back anything that's not a necessary spend, and hopefully would come in at least 5,000 under budget to make up for that. But no guarantee. But I think it's worst case scenario, we go additional 5,000 over. I don't think that's going to hurt our bottom line.
Okay. Aaron, anything to add with these TIDs?
John and Nick covered it unless there's other questions.
Okay.
I did want to point out, though, there's an email that's in the packet that was sent by Craig Johnson.
Yeah.
And so I had a couple questions to ask the staff on that. Under state statute, you're able to actually transfer money from one TID to another TID. And the problem that Ellers, who Johnson works for, is trying to address here is that, the way I understand it, once we do an overlay over this existing TID, the underlying tax basis of that is set for this old TID that we have. So what's going to happen there, even if we have development over here, the revenue that comes out of the tax increment will go into the new TID and not be able to be used for the old TID. So what that does, it means that there's not going to be enough money ever, if we overlay that, to pay for those improvements that were done over here for the intersection. Now, we know from a historical perspective, past boards approved this, and we've been paying it out of, we've been paying it out of our budget every year because there's not any money in this TID ready to pay for it.
Right.
So that part of it really wouldn't change, but the problem that I think that Matt will have to address will be what happens, what are the bondholders going to say when they know there's no way to ever really repay it? Maybe it's not a problem, but one way I think to address this would be if we currently have, and I just didn't get hold of you, Matt, to ask this question, but if we currently have a TID that's actually cash positive and has funds that are coming in that are not needed under its project plan for improvements, we could take that money, the way I understand it. We want to defer, obviously, to Lee on this, but that money could actually be used for this purpose over here to meet those obligations, if that's what they wanted to do, from a bonding standpoint. Otherwise, I think really what happens then is that there may need to be new bonds issued to take care of this issue over here, or maybe the bondholders are fine with just what's going on now. I defer to you on that, Matt. And the question I have for you too, Matt, is just how much, two things. One, what's still outstanding on the indebtedness in this TID, and two, how much is that a year that we're actually having to cover?
I don't know the complete total off the top of my head, but it's about around 100,000 per year, give or take. And because they're general obligation bonds, and just because the use or the payback was planned to come out of the TID, if it can't, then it just falls back to the general fund. So there doesn't have to be anything done bonding wise. We can just continue to pay that down through the debt levy. As far as the sharing of increment, Greg had looked into that in the past, and I remember there was some deadline as far as the life of the TID that, where we can no longer do that. We can double check with him, but I remember he looked into that, and because otherwise we would have been doing that for a while with either TID 5 or TID 7 helping out TID 6. And so we can double check on that, but I remember it was looked into at one point.
Yeah, I think we might want to look at it. There's quite a few requirements to be able to do that from a donor TID or recipient TID, but there may, I mean, I don't know. I'll defer to you on that, but there may be
Yeah.
a way to do it. But I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that before we, because what we're doing is we're putting a new TID in place over here that will include much of the land that's already in this existing TID 6. The benefit of doing that, though, is that currently, when we have if a project comes in over here, there's really not a whole lot of life left in that TID, so it's going to be difficult to use those funds. And I mean, there is a portion over here that we would hope and expect, well, under the current plan, there should be some additional commercial development done in this TID. And if that's the case, we may, have someone coming forward asking for some.
So because the TID is almost at the end, we don't have a lot of incentive left to.
But we can extend it though, right?
We can, once
2,
we put
3-year
the new one in
extensions.
place, it'll
Okay.
be 27 years.
Okay.
So we'll have 27 years, that's not even counting any extension, to do that. And so that's really going to change, I think, the financial dynamics of what we see coming in here, which may make this, hopefully, will make this a very viable project
Sure.
that will include what we already have approved in our general,
Okay.
plan. for
I think I
development.
understand what you're saying, but what is the advantage of extending TID 6? I know what you said for the disadvantage, but what is the advantage of doing that? Why not just create a new TID?
Well,
out there?
if we were going to just create a new TID, we'd have to close the existing TID, I believe, Lee, which means we'd have to pay
Which
off.
existing TID? You
Which
mean
we-
6?
Yeah, which I think would mean
We
we have
have
to
to
pay
close
off
it
the
out?
bonds.
Yeah.
We can't, okay, all right.
And so overlaying it really just is a new TID. Called it increment goes into new TID.
But we can't pay for the intersection.
Well,
Well,
there's never going to be enough money in the old, it's going to be.
Unless
some-
we got an extension and somehow got some
Yeah, but
building.
even
Yeah.
then, I don't know, it's only a few $1,000s a year, isn't it, that's being generated out of this TID?
It'll be a little bit more now because of Wisconsin Bank and Trust, but it's relatively minimal.
My understanding is if we had approved those apartments, we could have paid for that intersection, right?
Well, you could potentially pay for that TID, or I mean,
Right.
cover the cost
Cover
of
the
the TID.
costs. Mhm.
But that was one of the issues of that whole negotiation, was that there really wasn't the time and.
Without
that-
extensions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it could have, but the board wouldn't have been guaranteed what they wanted, which was commercial. And
I understand.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
I understand why we said no to it, but I thought
Yeah.
we had some time, that if we got the extensions and
Right.
we also used that extension about the MATC extension. you know
Yeah,
what I'm
there
talking
were
about?
two
You told us
separate,
Two
yeah,
separate
there were
issues.
two separate 3-year extensions that we
Right.
could do, but I don't think it would have, at least the board, when they were negotiating that, it wouldn't have met, what they would like to see as the ultimate development. And
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I voted no for it too, so.
And it wasn't so much that we turned it down as we said, this is what we want.
Right.
We,
And
if
he
you
didn't
want
come back
our
and
money,
said-
if you
yeah.
want the TIF money, then this is what we want.
Good
And
point.
They would never do that.
And aside to that is that the CDA is now looking at the TID process that we currently have in place and seeing if there should actually be more criteria. And that'll be for the board to decide, obviously, because now you can bring forward anything you want,
Mhm.
essentially, and there's really no direction. And I think a big issue will be whether we would be supportive of just doing a pure market rate or even luxury housing type TID without any other sort of benefit, like commercial or some other. Those are the issues that I assume we'll see back here, Aaron, in the near future. Obviously the board will decide, but so that's with Horizon. If you look back at Horizon, when Horizon came through, and I wasn't on the board, but if you look at Horizon, Horizon was fully aware when Horizon came forward that with the plan about the commercial. They also stated to the board at that time, if you look in the record, that they weren't going to develop that commercial until they had at least 50% of it leased up, which, and then I wasn't on the board at the time, but I don't recall there was any discussion about TIF at the time. Maybe there was, but I don't remember seeing a record about it. And they came forward with just a purely, I came forward with a plan where they were only going to do a portion of it, and in my mind made it real clear they would never do the commercial. They would just leave it. And that really wasn't wasn't acceptable to us at the time.
Yeah, it was the excavating that was going to cost them all the money. They were going to excavate the whole thing, but,
Right.
yeah, no, yeah.
Any comments, questions from anyone else?
Just to clarify, this action would not be creating the TIF. It would be starting Ellers on the process of putting together the project plan to ultimately create the TIDs. And
Spend $5,000, yeah.
And that's ultimately actually approved by the Joint Review Board. So that's later on what those appointments are for in there. The Joint Review Board is a member of each of the taxing jurisdictions and 2 members of from the village, one generally being the chief elected official, Jack, and then 1 citizen member.
Okay.
If I can make one more comment. I think something that'll come out of this process, saying we do it, will be improvements that'll be related to the development or things that can be included in the project plan for the TID. And as we look at the growth we're having here, and some of the capital improvements need to be done, I would assume whoever we hire, MSA or whoever, to look at that, some of these projects that we will need to deal with in the future may be projects that we will want to put into these plans, which means that increment, which we would have just not had, can now be used because we set up the TID to do those street improvements or things that need to be done that are related to the development that's coming in. So to me, that seems like a real good thing for us to be looking at for the taxpayers in Cottage Grove.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense to me. All right, somebody want to make a motion on this one?
I'll make a motion
Okay.
that we approve, got to find it again first. I'll make a motion that we approve the, moving the funds that we had allocated for TID 10, the excess funds, I can't remember exactly what that was there, but the excess funds to be moved from TID 10 to, for use in setting up, or I proposed TID 8 and TID 9, and that we also allocate an additional $5,000 toward the work to be done for the creation of those TIDs.
I'll second that.
All right, motion and a second to approve the CDA's recommendation to move forward with the creation of TID 10 and reallocation of funds to cover TID 8 and 9. Any other discussion?
Just one point, I appreciate what the CDA is doing with, I forget the name of the company, but getting on some sort of customer service venue that actually identifies projects and or business types to kind of feed to Aaron, so we're actually sparking some sort of interest, so I appreciate that.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. All right. Down to Utility Commission. Item A is discuss and consider award of South Main Street Lift Station reconstruction bid. JJ and Mike curious.
Village, we received 2 bids on the Main Street Lift Station upgrades and replacements, and it was Stop Construction and RG Houston. RG Houston's price came in at $1,225,340, and Stop's price was under $2,000 greater, $1,227,000 even. So we recommended to Utility Commission the recommendation to RG Houston, and the recommendation to the board from Utility Commission was to award it to RG Houston.
All right. And the Main Street Lift Station, is that's not this one, but
Down by the south of the tracks there by Highway.
Right. Okay, just so everybody's aware of what. Okay. Any comments or questions for
I
Mike?
have one question. I noticed you flagged everything all the way down Progress Drive. Is it actually going all Will that all be torn up?
That's the force main portion of the project that was awarded last
Oh,
month. and
okay.
Yeah.
So this is the portion that's right over by Main Street?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, any other comments, questions for Mike or JJ? If not, I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation from utility to award the project to RG Houston. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Between John and
All right. Motion and a second to award the lift station project to RG Houston. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Okay. And then we have an update on our tower lease agreement with UpNet.
Yes, we had Mr. Boucher put in all of our recommendations. When they initially presented us a contract, we wanted 24 hours notice before they'll need access. The contract actually is only for 2 years, so if they are, for any reason, not acting in good faith, we're out in 36 or 24 months.
Okay.
A long day. And Lee also stipulated that if and when they're done with the tower's returned to its original condition. So
Okay.
if they do hurt anything or anything, they got it.
They're not really drilling bolts, they're just clamping.
No, and
on.
the towers all have things where they should just basically clamp on. They already
Okay.
have existing things there just for antennas like this.
I don't mean to disappoint anybody, but we tried to keep it as bare bones as possible because they had sent us a proposal that was half a page long. And then I talked with JJ and Deb, and we went through, used some of our other tower leases as a format. So that's why you see some of these things in here.
And I don't know if I'd mentioned it at the board level or not, but looking at other communities that have these kind of antennas offering the local internet service or building connectivity, they don't typically make much money. It's usually small rural communities out, and they're at the most $200 a month. So really just getting the building connectivity for free is a deal.
It's a win for them.
That's good for us. All right. Sounds good, thank you. All right, item 7.B is the plan commission.
One item on utility.
Sure.
Is Dave Wallace will be moving, so next month will be his last meeting.
We need a citizen member
And we'll need another citizen member.
for utility. Okay, that's right. Thank you for reminding me that. I did get that email, okay. All right. Plan commission, and I'm thinking this is, we have a gentleman that did register to speak, I guess, and that's regarding the Parkside Ridge subdivision, sir? Yes. Okay, all right, this is second then. Item 7A is discuss and consider approval of a preliminary plat application for the proposed Parkside Ridge subdivision, and I guess we have Charles Roberts here to speak tonight. If you could come up here, sir, and just give us your name, and we try to keep public discussions to 3 minutes if that works for you, but feel free to talk to us.
If I go over a minute, I'll be surprised.
Okay.
Charles Roberts, township resident, 4364 Vilas Road. My main concern is a safety issue along Vilas Road, and just the convergence of everything that is proposed there. Clark Street's coming to the same spot, railroad track is there. There's going to be a bike path, which apparently is going to go alongside Vilas Road, crossing each of the 5 driveways, plus the cul-de-sac driveway. Does that sound right?
We just actually formed a bike path committee, so we're kind of working on rerouting.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
It might work better if the bike path went behind the houses. I don't know if that's
Okay.
even possible.
Sure.
Anyway, and then the rugby thing is there, and the kids' park is there. It just seems to me like anybody coming from the north, you know, they got to go up over the railroad tracks, and of course, everybody's going to obey the speed law, you know? It just seems like it's ripe for an accident there, to me. There are a number of accidents. So that's my concern. I don't like it being made on so close to a water, you know, a marshland area. But yeah, I just think it's real risky there with all the traffic and rugby players and kids and everything, and the kids, apparently in that, the developer said that they won't be having a little park there, but in any case, the kids would cross the road to the big park there anyway, so I just, doesn't seem safe to me, that's my concern.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, approval of the preliminary plat. I think the owners are here tonight.
Yeah, we have Tim Olson,
Yep.
the development team, and Mike Calkins with Snyder and Associates
Okay.
as the project engineer.
Did you gentlemen have anything to present tonight on this, or just, I mean, everybody's pretty much seen everything at this point, is it? Okay.
If you have questions or need some additional information, we'd be happy to talk to you some more.
All right. Any board members have questions for the gentleman? We can have them come up if you want.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind coming up and just introducing yourselves for the camera and.
Mike Calkins with Snyder and Associates.
Okay.
Tim Olson.
All right, John.
And I did have the time to sit through the plan commission meeting, so that was pretty much in depth, and I appreciate the discussions that went on there. Actually, getting into the covenants here, though, so there's going to be a neighborhood association, and it might not be for the developers, it might be for the board. I mean, how do we currently enforce neighborhood associations?
We really don't. I think that's usually when the last lot is built. That's about when it's turned over. Is that correct? Yep.
Well, I guess the comment I've been making as they've come through is that issues that are in the covenants where we have the ability to control something, we need to make sure that those sections of the covenants cannot be changed without village approval. And I appreciate you folks making the change after Plan Commission when that was brought up. And then, and when we look at this, there are quite a few items in here where they're saying the village, will have the ability to do different things, or to actually take enforcement. So from that standpoint,
That's why we
yeah.
look at the covenants, and as Plan Commission asked to have specific things in there, because otherwise the village doesn't enforce those things, but when it specifically calls for the village to do it, that's how we get standing to take care of it.
So the homeowners association would have to come before the village board if they wanted to change this once it's
Well,
turned over?
Well, no, just, there's only the sections in here where, the sections dealing like with what they want the home to look like or
Yeah.
whatever, we're not involved in that, but
Right.
the sections where we would have enforceability, I think one of them was like that you need to make sure that the shared driveway that comes down, that you're getting the snow off if it's 3 inches or more, those sorts of things from a life safety issue. If you don't, then we could plow it and we could charge back. Those sorts of things, if we didn't have a provision in here saying that you had to come back to the village to change that, the day after they were signed, they could just turn around and make an amendment and take the stuff out. I mean,
Right.
at least that's my concern.
Well, we went to 2 inches because that's what the village does, so we just followed them.
I think it said 3 in here. when I-
Yeah, it does, but we changed that. I don't know if it's showed up yet or not, but we're conforming to that.
Okay.
You have the version we had Friday afternoon, and I think we kept talking after that.
Right.
Okay, so if
Yeah.
our plows are out, yours would be to basically be moving snow?
If you get 2 inches, you're clearing it off.
Yeah.
Of course, that's really, to anybody that lives there, that's to their advantage too, because that's what
Sure.
you want.
Right?
And then the ACC that's mentioned, how is that different from if there's no neighborhood association? I'm trying to differentiate
The
the two.
architectural control.
Yep, it talks about, it will consist of the developer, and when the developer ceases to own, then it's going to consist of 3 members elected by the board. This board? or
No, that would be
Which board?
Their board.
by
Your board.
the
Neighborhood.
Right.
that would be by the developer / owner.
Yeah, they would have the architectural control committee keep, with one of their people or 3 other people, I guess. So anybody that's proposing to build a house would have to have it approved, the exterior footprint and all the design through you, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay,
to be consistent with the neighborhood.
sure. Okay.
Okay, and then the only discussion I had, this gentleman covered, and
Okay.
just the traffic, and who's going to own the road, and who can adjust the speed limits? Is it the
Sure.
village or the town? Because it's going to be a congested area pretty quick.
It'd be a good topic for a joint meeting.
Okay.
All right. All right, any other questions? Mike?
When I was reviewing the covenants, I noticed one thing I think you might want to look at, and it's 14.16A, which deals with the satellite dishes and those sorts of things, I think that you might want to relook at that. Under the FCC regulations, I think it's a little, you're more restrictive. I would suggest you're more restrictive than what you can be. So now to look at that. And then I just want to make a comment. I really appreciate with your development how you're working. You work so hard to really address the legacy trees that are there, and how I think you mentioned that at the Plan Commission that you were able to keep at least 50 of those legacy trees, and you only had like one that you're going to need to take out for your entire development. Something
Yeah, and I
like that.
doubt very much that person would want to take that tree off that lot because they'd do anything they could to keep that tree because it's a beauty, you know?
Okay.
I just had a quick question. At the Parks meeting, we discussed the fact that you have this in two phases, the first phase in the north and the second phase in the south. And the concern that just came up in the meeting was access from that south phase to the park across the street. We know that there's going to be some lots in between the two phases on Vilas that are town lots. So we wouldn't be able to control a sidewalk or any kind of path that would go through the town. So what we were wondering is if you could come up with a pathway, and I'm not sure, hopefully you got this feedback from us, but didn't mean to spring this on you, but a path from phase 2 somehow through phase 1, however you can do that, so that kids from phase 2 would be able to get through there and then get to that park without going on that busy, narrow street.
Yeah, and part of the conversation has been about the speed of the road, and I think
Slow
that's
that
going to
down.
be much more, because we have like 100 feet there. You know, normally have 66 feet of easement on
Okay.
each side, but we got 100.
On your property, but not the township property.
Yeah, those houses in between,
Right.
that's what I'm concerned about.
So, but as that road slows down, I mean, I think that'll help that. I don't know exactly how to answer.
Yeah,
But-
well, I mean, we were trying to figure it out, and we thought, well, maybe we'll just ask you, because we're trying to figure out a pathway between, or through, starting in phase 2 to go through phase 1 somehow. And we know there's hills there, those lots are big, there's a street that kind of goes down to, forgot the lot number, you don't happen to have a map with you, do you?
If you do, you can just put it under the
Yeah,
camera and
see
it'll come up on
the
the...
little camera there, that white camera, puts it on the screen so we can all see it. Yeah, it's that bottom lot, like, there's a, what is the bottom left lot number? Yeah,
P4.
okay. And there's
I'm
a
sorry,
street that
that's
almost,
P6.
there's a driveway, or rather, it almost goes back to that. Obviously, you have to access that somehow, right?
Yeah, there'll be a driveway that comes up.
Right, and what I was just curious about is if there could be a path. If it's impractical, I understand, but what I'm just thinking about it, yeah, go ahead,
Well,
sorry.
it could be, but we just bought this,
Oh, okay,
and so
great,
we pretty much could go through there
yeah.
Okay.
to get down through here, because
And we know there's a hill there too,
Right.
so, yeah.
Does it have to be?
If you can just think about that, yeah.
Yeah,
You know, it doesn't have to be
slope
10
of it
feet
can-
wide, but just so that, you know, people with strollers can, you know, go to the park, you know? That's what we're thinking about, from phase 2 to the park.
Right.
Providing that easement is one of the conditions in the staff reports, they would have to work that out with
Okay.
us before we sign off.
Okay, yeah. So, did you have anything else to add? You were, you're obviously working the meeting there about that? No? Okay.
I
Thanks,
guess
Sean.
I would ask the question then, is the slope of that path, so that we can actually analyze that? What is that maximum slope? Normally it'll be at 10% from bike path standpoint, but that's pretty steep even for that. But if it's a walking path, you have a recommendation, Mr. Maloney, on what we could use for analyzing that?
Well, we love 5%.
I know you do. That hill's not at 5%.
Just do your best is what we want, you know?
We'll attempt to stay at least what would be 10% or under.
Yeah,
and-
I'm not looking to block this, I just want to.
And I appreciate you offering the solution with the new property then.
Yeah.
You just-
well, then you know, we'll have that whole driveway too, so
Uh-huh,
we can make that part of that.
okay.
Okay.
Just want you to think about that. Yeah.
Chief Labor, regarding the speed limits, I mean, we talked previously at LEC, I guess, about some mechanisms, maybe about creating speed limits in this area. Is that something we can do on the township side then as well?
I think you've done an engineering study on that, right?
Yeah, we did a geometric of the roadway, 1,000 feet of roadway. It covers, I think it was 5 of the lots, and we left out lot 2 and 8, which are the, would access the cul-de-sac and not actually come out onto the road. And I believe your plat has little lines on the Vilas Road for those 2 lots. That restricts their access to be on the cul-de-sac. So I took the other 5 lots, it's 1, 2, skip, or 1, and then skip 2 and 8, and 9, 10, 11, 12, down that way. And 1,000 feet of that roadway, if you divide it by the 5 lots that we had in there, it comes to about 177 feet per lot.
Okay.
And what we find, if the distance is under 200 feet, it could be a speed zone for semi-urban district. And so that sets it at 25 mile per hour posting,
Okay.
Based on the driveway density. And that would act on both sides of the road.
Okay.
On a 2-lane road, you have to have balance.
So that would certainly help the issue at that point.
Yeah, well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And how many feet is it between, did you say?
I probably have to ask Mike, I guess, to get that.
Yeah, it probably would be closer to my calculator, but it was under 200 feet.
Okay. Mick, any?
I have a question, Aaron. And I appreciate Jim you bringing this up. This was not something that was discussed at the Plan Commission, so it's a good point. For us to address now. So when I look at 10, it says at the request of the Park, Recreation, and Forestry Committee. But this is land that's not going to be brought back in as a second plat, correct? This is going to be something that will remain in the town. Is that correct? This.
No, the land they're talking about connecting to would be land that Tim and his team also owns immediately to the south. So I
my
think
thought
what the
would be
request
that-
was, when that area develops, we want a route from there through this area over to Bakken Park, as opposed to going up Vilas.
But is it possible that will never come, that this portion of land though, let's say when the second development occurs, will that second development include the portion of land we're talking about right now? Or will that not be included?
Yes, they're directly adjacent.
They'll abut them. Okay. So would you be, it seems like we may want to,
Do you have a
We'll have to
picture, do you have
track-
a picture of that land as well? Well, it's just down here.
Yeah, these 2 parcels right here.
And it goes further south.
Right.
Yeah.
okay, so that dedication will occur when they bring in this.
And then it goes along around the houses and all the way to Vilas.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think what we're looking
To
for
the
is,
south, I mean.
Yeah, this would come back around.
And butts, yeah.
I think what we're looking for is the easement. They wouldn't actually build a path unless there's something to build it to, ultimately to a south.
That was my question.
Yeah.
So we will address this. If there's a second phase that comes in, we'll address that at that point. in time.
But we have to have an easement if it's going through people's property.
Yeah.
It's a bit easier to tell them now, there's going to be an easement through, and then you sell the lot. Then
We'd appreciate
Yeah.
nailing it down. So
taking
whoever
it
buys that
away
lot-
from somebody, because you can't take away property to build bike paths and pedestrian paths. You just
But
can't.
anybody who would move there would certainly want that.
Right, well, I mean, but they're going to get traffic from that south, yeah,
Right.
through,
Right.
just depends on what kind of person you have. So we want to set it up right.
So Aaron, we need to actually show that and reflect it on the current plat that's before us, correct? Correct.
Yeah, that
So
would be one of the
tonight, we would want
conditions.
to
They would have
say,
to add that.
not at the request, but we really are going to say we should
Yes.
state that they need to do it.
Yeah, we don't
That's
care
what
the
it says.
path, where you go, but just
Just provide
make it
the-
work.
Just accomplish it.
Yeah.
It's included in
The condition says they
They're not
shall
gonna
provide
dictate.
these.
That was the next step, to ask Aaron and Mike for any engineering or staff conditions, so we could vote on this. So Aaron, is there anything else that we had?
Yeah, I think in your packet, you had the village action report, which had all the conditions that were approved at the plan commission. You know, as we talked about, we had since gone back and forth on the covenants a couple of times and got those more in line with what the plan commission was looking for. So the conditions in the staff report dated March 16th. It's a much shorter list. Those would be the ones we'd be acting on tonight. There's a few labeling items on the plat itself, just clarifying some of the park fees. MMSD fees would be the developer's responsibility. A couple remaining items to clean up in the covenants. I think as it's written in the last revision, it says any variance in the covenants would have to come to us, and I think we want to limit it just to those categories we're interested in, as spelled out in the report. At JJ's suggestion, we did change the 3 inches of snow to 2 inches. We just want to add that to the covenants. We want to see a shared driveway agreement for all the parcels P4 through P7. Deed restriction prohibiting grading or tree removal in the conservation area of any affected lots, P3 through P7, P10 through P15. And then number 10, as we've been talking about, providing the easement for the bike and pedestrian access. And then for the zoning, which is the second item we'd be voting on, there was some talk of leaving some of the parcels as rural holding, as we discussed that at the Plan Commission. It was decided that they should just all be single-family residential. So that's one of the conditions. And the second condition is that the zoning would not take effect until the final plat is recorded.
Mike, did you have anything to add besides what you had in your package?
There were a couple things that came up at utility after comments were generated, and I state them, and I'd like this one read in, and that was related to a question on the water services from Planning Commission. That we'd like to have one hydrant added, as directed by the fire chief, as far as the best location to serve it because of the length of the driveways. There was a question if the water main ended at the cul-de-sac, and and I said, no, that probably wouldn't be a good idea exactly because we've got to have, running 1-inch services that far would not provide adequate pressure. So there'd be some location back there anyhow near perhaps the turnaround that's required. So that would be the ultimate, the one comment we want to add.
Okay.
And then I had a question on where the phosphorus regs came from a member of the Planning Commission. And that was from the village ordinance for the TMDLs, so.
Okay. Those conditions are acceptable then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention, this is the preliminary plat rule, and it's come up several times where people say, well, we didn't really realize what we were approving when we approved the preliminary plat, but in our code and in the state statutes, it says that approval of a preliminary plat shall not constitute automatic approval of the final plat, except that if the final plat is submitted within 24 months of preliminary plat approval and conforms substantially to the preliminary plat layout as indicated in a certain section of the Wisconsin statutes, the final plat shall be entitled to approval with respect to such layout. So just so people understand that this is the time to ask the questions, to make the changes, so that when they come back with the final plat and it's substantially the same, then they're entitled to an approval.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate that. That's clarifying. Anything else?
I think it's worth noting, Aaron does mention it in his staff report, but Mr. Olson did hold a neighborhood meeting and then also met with the town chair and the town's engineer and, took their comments to what is presented here.
And their engineer is looking to review the stormwater report in its final format also. So that was the engineering, takeaway on that one. So. And the speed limit issue was discussed, and I think Mike's addressed that with the research after that meeting.
Looking for a motion?
Yep.
I would make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat along with the, subject to the conditions set forth in the staff report and by MSA in MSA's report, along with an amendment to 4.16A of the covenants if our attorney deems that to be necessary.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there a second? I'll second it. That's fine. Motion and a second to approve the preliminary plat for proposed Parkside Ridge subdivision. Any other discussion? John?
Does the village, I mean, do we have the right to change the speed limit there in front of the subdivision, or is it town-owned, or? just-
Because of what Mike was explaining with the density of the lots, we can change it on both sides of the road. We don't have to jump through other hoops. And I just want to thank you, gentlemen. I know you've been here a few times in the past. Thank you for your tenacity in getting this done and working with us. I appreciate it.
One step at a time.
Exactly. All right, any other comments? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. And then on to B, discuss and consider approval of a rezoning application for the proposed Parkside Ridge subdivision to apply SR4, single-family residential, and park and open space zoning to the lots within the subdivision. The information, again, was in your packet. I don't know, Aaron, if you have anything to add to this as far as zoning, just kind of in layman terms, I guess what it means.
Just again, all the residential parcels would be SR4, single family, and this wouldn't actually take effect until the final plat's recorded.
Okay. Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve?
I'd make a motion that we approve the zoning as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Motion and second to approve 7B, the approval of the rezoning application for Parkside Ridge subdivision to SR4 and park and open space zoning to the lots within the subdivision. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. Moving on, Deer Grove EMS Commission. Anything in that? I know Troy was on.
Me.
Okay.
Yes. So we met on March 15th, last week. Been a very busy month for EMS. I think they had a record number of calls. That's not good for those getting the calls, but that's just the nature of the service. We were also helping our neighbors in Cambridge, which added a few calls when they've had some staffing gaps as well. We discussed the consideration for the financial statements and the audit from Johnson Block and Company. The draft was presented and it was shown to be acceptable. They did note the two typical gaps that usually small districts have, and we do too, and that's due to the nature of, not diversifying the duties of that. Again, that's a problem that most small EMS districts have, so that's just a struggle. We then discussed about setting up a subcommittee for collective bargaining with the union, and so that was set up and selected. Myself, Chris Hampton, and Gary from the village of Deerfield are on that. And we'll be working with the union reps in the coming weeks to begin that negotiation. We proposed and approved a draft contract for the town of Deerfield. This is a result of Ryan Brothers indicating that they are no longer want to serve the town of Deerfield in that capacity and gave them notice. So we're proposing on setting that up, again, pending approval from the town, and ultimately will be, I believe, all of the municipalities of setting that up for July 1st, so that'll be coming through. Let's see. We then got a discussion of the issues with the monitors that are on the ambulances. Unfortunately, the folks that make these and maintain them are pulling out. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there. So we looking at options right now on how to address that. We're having more and more issues with that, and the service levels are continuing to be pulled back, as well as now they're not making spare parts, et cetera. So this is something that we're faced as a district. So more to come, unfortunately, on that, because the monitors are expensive.
I think they're about 17,000 or 18,000 a piece.
More like 30.
Now they're,
Yeah, they went up.
Monitors or?
Yeah, for all the
EKG?
EKG defibrillator thing all in one.
all the monitoring you would do on any type of
Yeah.
patient.
Wow.
And then they transfer that information to wherever, if you're going, you have to go to the emergency room or whatever, they'll transfer that information. So that then they're up to speed right away.
Yep.
And can address the patient's issues at hand. So we do need to address that. And we're looking at a number of different ways of doing that, through grants, through the association. So again, it's the preliminary discussion of that. We also talked about teaming up with Madison College for student field internships and approved that as a district. This again is to bring students out and get firsthand experience. They're not by any means acting in any capacity for the district. This is again just a training opportunity for those students. A lot of districts do it, and it's a nice give back and hopefully train the future folks that will be in our district. Had a brief discussion about the consolidation and essentially table that because really there's other pressing issues right now, particularly with the monitors. And we still need to hear back from some of the Cambridge municipalities as well on whether or not they want to move forward and ultimately put forth the monies for it. And the next meeting will be on April 19th in Deerfield.
Okay.
Any questions?
Mick?
These contracts that we're entering into, we're looking at contracting for the emergency services, like for the town of Deerfield. Concern I have about this is I don't think there's a clawback. I mean, if you'll enter into a contract and they'll pay X amount, which that's not how it works for the village. And so the village, if there's a deficit, they come to us and they say, go back to your taxpayers and have them pay up. And when these contracts, I don't think that's the case. I think the contract, you know what you're paying and that's it. And so here's how I see it. These contracts, you can just address the risk right up front. For us, we never know. It comes back to us, and someone will come in, hopefully not like they did last year, come in and say, these are just basically numbers we're just kind of throwing in here and trying to make this thing work out for expenses and revenue. It troubles me on that because I'm not sure that our residents aren't subsidizing these other contracts, and I think it's something we seriously need to take a look at and make sure that's not the case, or have a provision built into these contracts where we can go back, just like happens to us, they come back and they say, oh, I'm sorry, but last year we ran a deficit of $500,000, therefore you got to make it up. And these other contracts, it's like, we're done, we paid our amount, that's your problem. I really think we should take a serious look at these. I know we don't control, which is really frustrating because we pay most of the money and we don't control what happens with this board, which I think is unfortunate. And I think we should really take a hard look at that. If there is a consolidation that comes through with some other group, we need to make sure that we are able to negotiate an agreement where if we're paying 51% of the money, we're going to control 51% of the decisions. I mean, we're going to have control of the decision-making powers because right now I just have this feeling, not a feeling, they come in here and they just tell us what we got to pay. And our only recourse really is to say, here, we're giving you our 1-year notice, guys, and then we'll talk. And that's a pretty, draconian thing to do, and I don't think we want to do that. But right now, it's just, I don't think we're doing what's in the best interest of our residents.
John, is the EMS council looking at these contracts, or do
Yes.
they just, okay, good.
Yeah.
That's
Dan.
Dan Parker, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but here's the problem. They can enter into whatever, they can charge them $1, and the other members of this, the EMS can just outvote us. We can say, no, that's not fair. And we're paying we're carrying most of the weight, and they can come back to us and say, that's too bad. We made a decision here, and you can't stop us, and you're gonna see this come back, and, oh, by the way, make sure that you include that next year in your budget so that your citizens pay it. I don't like that.
I know our current contract, I think, with Town of Pleasant Springs is a set amount, I think it is.
Yeah, and this is mirrored right after that.
I mean,
Yeah.
those are just,
It's an issue that's been here for a long time, and we've talked about it, and Mick is exactly right, that, we're paying the free, but we don't have the say. It's essentially minority shareholders control this business.
tonight, we're struggling on $5,000, right? And these guys come in and they ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, if we're looking for trying to really figure out where money could be saved, I'd really take a look at these guys and their budgeting. And we still haven't seen the audit financials. And we're at the end of March.
It was just presented at the meeting on the 15th, so it should be available from that perspective. And it was unassigned funds was down because we paid for the ambulances, but much improved from the last time we took a look at it a few months ago.
But let me just tell you, here's my problem with how they do their budgeting. They do it, what I have seen from these folks is they do it on a cash basis. So we throw our money in the beginning of the year, right? So everything looks rosy. Everything's rosy because you got a whole huge amount of money that comes in from us. And so you only get around to like August, September, October, November, December, that part of the year when the big pile of money that the village plopped into the pot starts to not cover expenses. And that's what we saw last year. They come in and they're showing, there's a huge gap. And then you go back and you look at the last 3 or 4 years, there's been huge gaps. And maybe this year will be a great year. Maybe the last part of the year last year, they had a lot of runs and made a lot of money. I have no clue. All I could go on was what they presented. What they presented showed them losing hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 3 years.
You have to remember that a large portion of the citizens who are serving are on Medicaid or Medicare, and we only get below cost when we serve those citizens. And that's just the reality of the service that we're providing. So I certainly encourage you, Mick, to come to an upcoming meeting, and we can talk about this with those that know much more about it than I, particularly the chief, and walk through all this, or have a separate meeting and walk through this. Certainly he has a lot of experience beyond, he's just new to this position, but beyond this. And yes, it is a little scary, and I totally agree with you that that we do not have the voting proportionality related to the cost, and this has been a problem since day one of the district, which is one of the things that certainly if we ever did any sort of consolidation that I would want to require from the village perspective. That's.
I can tell you as a lawyer, I like to choose my pro bono work. And what I see here is this is our pro bono work for a lot of other municipalities, but wow, why don't we enter into a contract? That'd be fantastic. We know exactly how much it's going to cost our citizens every year. And let these other folks make up the difference if it doesn't work out. Let them take the risk. That's not how it works. We take the risk, and we have the most risk because we're the ones that pay the most money, and then we can't vote. We can't vote to stop this thing from happening. Well, we could, but that means that's going to be a draconian thing to happen if we do that. And I get it.
Although we can't really get to stop it. I mean,
Well, we
that's-
give them notice. We give them notice.
That's all
but
you can do.
That's a
That's right.
pretty draconian thing to do. So I understand, and there's a need to subsidize this, and there always will be, I would assume. But why should we subsidize folks in Deerfield? That's
Yeah.
crazy. Why should we subsidize folks in the town of Deerfield? I don't get it. And I really would like to know how much they're charging them and whether that really is, and maybe it is appropriate. Maybe they're figuring out these funds and on the runs and they're figuring all that out and they have the clairvoyant ability to look and know how many runs they're going to make, you know, in the town of Deerfield. I don't know.
Well, we were already doing 25% of the runs there anyway, because Ryan Brothers couldn't address it or didn't have the right folks in order to address the particular need.
Was there any discussion about doing on a per call thing as versus a fixed amount every year? Is that? or is
Well,
that
you're
not-
already getting the per call anyway, so
Okay.
you do a call, and so in addition, the per call, they're also subsidizing, putting in everything, just like Pleasant Springs does. So
Okay.
it does help flatten the overall fixed costs of the service. And again, we're driving right through there all the time, and already, you know, supporting, at least last year, about 25% of the runs. So this one's a no-brainer. It's the consolidation that is a much more complicated egg to crack, and certainly one where I would like our voting rights to be in line with whatever we're paying.
Yep. Matt?
And regarding the consolidation, John, and I don't know if it makes a difference at all at the commission, but I think deciding on something like how would the board be configured and how would the voting,
Yeah.
I think that would be one of the first steps instead of, you know, they've already done a lot of work on it. You know, I would just pay for their staff and, you know, or consultant time or whoever, to get so far down the road when that's kind of the first step that it seems like the village would be concerned about, you know, before getting too far.
And we really haven't gone that far. We had a study about the university, which didn't cost us anything, and pretty much showed that the benefits, at least from their study, as far as I'm concerned, was more towards those municipalities that didn't have paramedic level service. So it really doesn't warrant at this point moving ahead, unless those municipalities want to pay for the study by the consultants. And then we could take that information and become a smarter service, or it may show us something different that the university students didn't see.
Right. Okay. All right, thanks, John. Reports from village officers. Troy is absent tonight. Nick, anything else?
Nothing to report.
Okay. James?
No report.
Okay, Jeff? Okay. Under John's, he's got a couple items here, and one is appointment of a police commission citizen member, and then he has an appointment of a board member to the Joint Fire Department Committee, sorry. I'll let John talk.
First off, I want to apologize for hitting reply to all. I did get an education from Matt. Thanks on how to maybe do that in the future.
I'm going to also send all of you this language that you can put down at the bottom of your correspondence that says, don't hit all.
Between that and actually, I thought the last meeting when we talked about future discussion items, I thought we had the potential meeting with the town board on there. So my apologies of learning, but obviously I left a vacant position on the police commission. They don't meet all that frequently, is whenever the chief needs a meeting, but I do have a citizen member, Jess Robinson, who's agreed. He's a resident of the village, and I think he'd be a good addition. So if I make the motion to appoint Jess on the police commission.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion second to appoint Jess Robinson as a citizen member of the police commission. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. And then the joint fire?
Yeah, with the joint fire, I was a little confused because the website actually had 3 town members, 3 town board members, and 3 village board members. And then when I saw this, it had alternates, so I was a little confused, but I think the language is we do need 3
You're supposed to have 3 village board members on joint fire. And then the alternate idea, John, has evolved over a 5 or 6 year period where everybody couldn't attend the meeting, and then it would be like, well, now I'm taking a class and I'd still like to stay on, but can, someone be designated as an alternate? So that's what that's all about.
So it needs to be a village board member
Yeah.
as the primary. And I'll leave it up to the board members to decide if they have enough time to do that. It's just.
Sure. And it's only every other month. It's only uneven months, 6:30, and they're actually fairly short meetings.
Usually,
Haven't
yeah.
been to one.
Yeah, so I guess if anybody is interested now, we can vote on it, or send me an email and we can put it on the next agenda.
It meets on.
6:30 on Mondays,
Monday,
fourth
yeah.
Monday.
Fourth Monday, yeah.
So I guess let me know if you're interested and we can take care of that right away at the next meeting.
Even or odd months, right?
It varies because
Okay.
sometimes
I think
there's.
we're meeting next Monday. so
Yep.
next meeting.
Yeah, and sometimes it's every month, depending on like budgets, time, whatever.
And if you join, you get your very own Lee Boucher packet of all the agreements, which apparently our fire chief wasn't getting, so we're going to. make
Yeah,
sure
for
he
what
has it.
it's worth, our new fire chief didn't have access to a lot of information that was pre-existing, so I want to thank him for the effort he's put in trying to get things up to speed.
I can go ahead and do that if there's somebody else.
If nobody has any objection, I'll nominate Jeff Lundberg.
Second?
Okay? All right. Motion and second to nominate Jeff Lundberg as the third village board member to the Joint Fire Committee. Is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, Jeff.
And the last item, I just wanted to thank Kevin and Matt for covering the different vouchers and different codes, and I think they actually provided a second option that I don't know if we'll get to as we approve vouchers tonight, but it's just a different report that the system runs as to what's reimbursable from contractors or developers versus what the village is
Sure.
paying, so appreciate your time there.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of, but yeah, they do a good job with it.
And we can talk about that a little bit more under 9A. There's under the normal consider approval of vouchers, and we can also discuss the report format.
Okay.
So.
Then the one last question that actually got me on this, I apologize, but it was actually, I think, a couple of meetings ago with the building inspections.
Mhm.
Do we actually have, is there like a set contract or agreement or fee service with Mr. Beacon and the?
Okay, there used to be. And this is what happens when boards change. I was told the village should have all of the, like the electrical contractor, the building inspector, et cetera, should have contracts. Then a new board comes in and goes, well, this is a waste of time. Why do we have these contracts? And there hasn't been one since then. But if that's the direction, the building inspector is appointed at the pleasure of the board. And if the board wishes to have an independent contractor agreement that would incorporate what the ordinance talks about in terms of duties, we could certainly do that. So I would just wait.
Thanks, I don't know if that's come up before. Or.
Yep. Okay.
You could request as a future agenda item, and
Sure.
we could go that road.
Okay, John, anything?
The only thing I wanted to note was, for those that had a chance to go to the Durham Residents Open House, the community room up there is phenomenal, and it's really going to be an asset to Cottage Grove area. It's probably almost 200 people, I think, get in there.
Very nice facility.
Yeah.
Very well done.
It's impressive.
Okay.
So,
All right, under mine, I have an appointment of a citizen member to the Glacial Drumlin Bike Path Committee, and Melissa did contact me, but we did already have somebody in mind, but if she's interested, we're looking for somebody for ordinance. So there are openings, it's not like there's not a spot, but, yeah, we have a member, we had a person, but she had to withdraw, so Chris Nelson is interested in, and this was brought to my attention thanks to Sean from Parks and Rec. He's interested in serving on the Glacial Drumlin Bike Path Committee, which obviously meets tomorrow night, so he's jumping in with both feet. If nobody has any objections, I'll nominate Chris Nelson to the Glacial Drumlin Bike Path Committee. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second to nominate Chris Nelson. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion Motion passes. Thank you. And the next item, the last thing I want to do is nominate myself to another committee, but we do have to have a joint review board. So Mike Malaj, our former president of the Chamber of Commerce, and myself are going to be on the joint review board, and Matt and Aaron had touched on kind of what that involves before. So if somebody wants to make a motion for that, get a second, move that along.
I'll make a motion to appoint Mike and Jack to the Joint Review Board.
Second.
Motion and second to appoint Mike Malaj and myself to the Joint Review Board. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Lee, anything?
Yeah, I was just reminded of this in the previous discussion, that is, the board should give some thought to whether you want to have an ordinance committee. We have had it, and that was where ordinances went to be given birth or death. But we kind of got away from that because in terms of trying to set aside enough time, legal time primarily, to not just staff it, but then come up with drafts. Now, you know, everybody can come up with drafts, but ultimately it ends up with the lawyer to take a look at. And so it's pretty much been dormant for the last year and a half. So you should, you know, we ought to give some thought to that, whether it's now or at budget time, to say, okay, the ordinance committee will have a budget of such and such. But that would be something you should think about.
The other side to that is generally most topics land into, you know, some department or committee that already exists, and then, you know, if it's something police related, instead of having the ordinance review committee look at it and having law enforcement, it just made more sense to have the people that are more familiar with the police department to do that initial review, and then it comes to the board, and you don't necessarily need that other step and cost.
Okay. Something to think about for the future agenda, whether it can be more expeditious with or without the ordinance review. All right, anything else, Lee?
No.
Okay. Matt, anything else?
Recognizing Aaron for his work on the TID creation, especially the mapping side. Without Aaron on staff, it would have that definitely would have been something we'd had to get a consultant for. So,
okay,
good job for
Thank
Aaron
you.
on that.
My maps are all black and white. Is there a reason for that?
No color copy?
Well, might be part of it.
Aaron, anything? All right, Chief Labor has under his agenda an annual report, use of force report, and internal affairs report. I'll let him talk about that a little bit.
All right, first one I'll go over is the annual report for 2017. And I obviously won't go through every statistic in here, but on page 2 under crime, I thought it was important to note that in 2017 we didn't have any murders, no armed robberies, no kidnapping, no prostitution arrests, no gambling arrests, arsons, animal cruelty cases, and no pornography offenses. We did have 5 aggravated assaults in 2017, of which we solved all of them with arrests. We had 1 non-stranger rape offense in 2017 that was solved with an arrest and charges, and we had 4 burglaries in 2017, which is a dramatic decrease from 2016 when we had 15 of them. We also had 35 thefts in 2017 compared to 48 in 2016. Auto thefts were at 2, and we had 21 vandalism offenses in 2017 compared to 39 in 2016. And after I did this report under the National Council for Home Safety and Security, they changed their rankings and only went with cities of 10,000 or above. So I then went on, did a search, and found that Niche, N-I-C-H, does the same survey, but they use cities from like 1,000 and up. So I went through there and used the same statistics for cities of 5,000 and above for 2017, and we ranked 13th. safest city in the state of Wisconsin, using their criteria outlined in that paragraph. So actually, we got a little safer this year. Our calls for service are down a little bit this year, but as you'll note, our calls for service are a lot of self-initiated things also. We're down 2,000 in property checks this year, which is the officers stopping at a business late at night, checking doors. And a lot of that can be attributed, the drop in that could be attributed to us doing a lot more traffic stops. We had 400 more traffic stops in 2017 and a lot more directed patrol due to some thefts and burglaries and activities that were occurring in the village. So not concerned about it. We're still doing a lot of property checks. So on to page, you'll see obviously we had a promotion, Sergeant Stortz in 2017. There's our Detective Anderson was also promoted in 2018. 2 swearing-ins. Always got to put the police dog in there. People love the dog. Hired Samantha Vaught in 2017. She's one of the office personnel. One thing of note, our emergency medical services assists went up by about 70 calls in 2017, so we are being called out to assist EMS on a regular basis, even ever increasing, it seems, every year. We do seem to get there fairly quickly. Sometimes the EMS people are responding from other areas of their service area. We're under underage drinking on page 11. We're definitely low in those numbers, and I'm not exactly sure what to attribute that to, but we don't seem to get the house parties in this community that we do in other communities where you'll cite 17 kids in one party. We just don't get those, and I don't know if, I can't say for sure whether we're having them or not, but if we aren't getting a lot of calls for them and aren't citing a lot of people for it. Under traffic enforcement, we've gone down 3 years in a row now on our accidents. You'll see at the top of page 12, we're up dramatically the past 3 years in traffic stops, up dramatically in citations, and we go down every year in reportable accidents from 105 to 99 to 73 this year. So liking that could be attributed to increased enforcement. It could also be attributed to us educating the public a little bit better.
Dan, speaking of that, you might want to mention the changes in the law in terms of failure to stop signs, that type, and how much more there, certainly the department is looking for that. And if you are, well, I'll answer it myself. If you are stopped for an improper stop at a stop sign and you kind of go rolling through, now you actually have to take a class, and they've come down on a whole series of those things, and I know the department's been watching for that.
That's good to know.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah. I directed at some of the lawbreakers among us. So.
Well, the funny thing is, we will frequently get calls about people running stop signs. They just roll through here all the time. So we'll get out there and we'll increase our enforcement, and a good percentage of the people we pull over are the people that live right in that neighborhood. So I don't know what to do with that, but we will get out there if we get a complaint. Proactive programming, we do a lot of proactive programming in the village, and we're very proud of that. It's nice to get out and meet with the community and interact with them. We still do vehicle lockouts for people, which is pretty unusual. Our school resource officer started this year, and she has been great up there. We get nothing but positive comments. 99% positive comments for having Jess up there in the schools, and so I wanted to acknowledge that in the annual report. We do have a program tomorrow night at Monona High School for heroin, and it's part of the Cottage Grove Coalition Cares that the police department is part of, and so that's That's a program that will be going on tomorrow night. We put on one last year at New Life Church. It was also heroin related. Our budget for 2017, we came in under budget, so that's a good thing. On Facebook, we're up to 2,182 friends instead of 1,822 as I had in the report. And unless anybody has any questions about the annual report, I'll move on to the next one. Use of force, these are all reports that I'm required to do. And so I do the use of force report for 2017, and we had 6 documented use of force incidents. Our use of force incidents in Cottage Grove are much less than most communities, and I think all of our use of force involved us hands-on with someone, not taser, not pepper spray, not baton strikes, and definitely not shooting anybody. So I described those 6 use of force incidents that occurred within our jurisdiction. We did have one use of force incident that I found was not according to policy, and that officer was disciplined as a result of that. And from reviewing the incidents, I didn't find any training requirements that needed to be changed or any other remediation other than remedial training for the officer in the use of force incident that he was disciplined for. Does anybody have any questions about those?
Nope, just want to say thank you, I guess from an EMS standpoint, because when the police here show up at an EMS scene ahead of the ambulance, a lot of communities don't have that luxury, and the EMTs go to a lot of the same places the police do, and sometimes they just go right back to the ambulance and say we're not going in until the police get here. So we have a pretty good thing going here as far as them helping EMS out. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Director of Public Works, JJ, review of MSA annual report.
You'll also find in your packet our annual report to the DNR as an MS4 community on our stormwater. I'll be as brief as I can unless there are specific questions. Basically, this is where we report things like spending on information and education and outreach, which we are contributors to the Manawatu Madison Area Stormwater Partnership, and they do a lot of that work throughout the county. And as many of you know, we contribute to the heroines through MMSD to reduce phosphorus countywide. Another thing, this is the first year that we had MSA conduct official illicit discharge and outfall inspections. They did 1/5 of our stormwater outfalls inspected. They put the information into our new GIS map, and subsequently I've got a list of some maintenance that we'll take care of this summer when we have time. Reported no illicit discharges, so essentially there's nobody dumping anything down those storm sewers, and we didn't have to do any investigations. Along those same lines, MSA conducts inspections of all the construction sites throughout the village. We also had no violations and no warnings or citations were issued on any of those sites. We report that we removed 75 tons of street sweepings. We report the salt usage throughout the winter season. And yep, I just report the GIS mapping update, and that an update of our stormwater model is in the budget for 2018. So if there are no other questions or anything specific on that.
Anything for JJ? All right, thank you. All right, moving along, we got communications and miscellaneous business. First one is discuss approval of vouchers and discuss report format. I guess if you want to touch on the format first, maybe.
Yeah, Deb has a handout of.
Okay.
So there's in the packet is the bills list, and Deb and I met, as John mentioned, with John to look at a couple different formats. The system we have, our general ledger system, can produce 3 different ones, and Deb was looking into combining 2 of those 3. Do I have that right?
Yep.
You can kind of discuss it a little bit more.
Well, we used to, just to go back a little history, we used to do a report by,
That's an eye chart.
I know, by GL number, so it would be, instead of by the actual vendor, it used to be by GL number. Then the board at that time didn't like that, so they changed it to be by vendor, which is what you've been getting. After talking to John, he wanted to, they didn't want to see the GL number, so it was taken out. After we talked to John, he thought the GL number would be helpful, but it's also nice to see it by vendor as well. So I did a little manipulating, and the ones that I handed out on the table, this new has it the way you had it, but I added this column that has the GL number in it. And this helps in the fact that you will know then what part of that invoice is actually what you're approving. So if you, like, for instance, if you go to page 8, I'll just pick on MSA. For their invoice, because Fund 210 is anything for developers, so that's in and out, money in and out. So we will be getting reimbursed from the developers for any of the 210 funds. The 600 and 601 funds are water and utility funds. So that's already been approved by the Utility Commission, and it's not what you're approving here in the vouchers. So out of this invoice that came from MSA, the only ones that hit the levy are the ones with the 100 account numbers, or GL fund numbers, and then the 410. And the 410 is capital, and that was borrowed for. And the largest invoice, or portion of the invoice, is the stormwater engineering West Lawn 3, which is the wetland scrape, whatever that project's called, that was also budgeted for. So in reality, out of this 47,000, the only thing that's actually hitting an expense that wasn't budgeted for is $402.99. So it's important when you're looking at them and you're looking at the invoices and you're thinking, oh my God, we're paying them $50,000. We are, but most of that's coming back, or it was budgeted for, or it was borrowed for, and it's accounted for. So the recommendation was to change the report to look like this format, unless anybody else has any other suggestions.
I think once you explain it, it makes sense. We got both categories.
And these are always available to, if you have questions, email, call, come in and look at them. I mean, they're there for you to peruse.
Deb, do you have a key to those, you just rattle off several codes that might be helpful, particularly if we have...
The fund numbers?
Yeah.
Sure, I can make one up.
Sure. Maybe on like an index card even or something like that.
It could be right here.
Mhm.
Sure.
Okay.
And it's really just the first 3 numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, for...
Yep.
So the GL numbers, you could compare it to the actual budget, I mean, if you wanted to.
Yep, you sure
Okay.
can.
And you'll see quarterly financials where you'll actually see what's been spent compared to budget.
Okay. Sounds good. Any questions for Deb? Thank you.
Thanks for doing that. I certainly don't want to change what the board already had in place, but once you explained the different 3-letter GL account numbers, it made a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, no, it's great. I appreciate it. It's a lot of work. All right, so regarding approval of vouchers, anybody have any questions, comments on the current voucher? Any additions, corrections?
I just had a question about the annual ambulance payment.
Mhm.
That is the one that we no longer own, correct?
Yes.
That's what I thought. That's
And we
all.
have one more year.
Yeah, you answered both my questions, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that's true. Yep. Okay, anything else? Any comments, questions? If not, I'll make a motion to approve the vouchers as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second to approve the vouchers. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Okay, motion passes. Correspondence, nothing official? Anything in the office, Lisa?
No.
Good stuff? Okay. All right, future agenda items. Anybody have anything that we need to put on there?
May I just make a comment, Jack? I
Yep.
talked about John, about the town meeting item, so it was brought up to be a future agenda item.
Mhm.
And, there's no objection, but I think just the purposes of just creating a record. If we get someone on the board to second it, then we don't have to, technically the ordinance says we need it in writing from a second board member to get it on the agenda.
Okay.
But I think this is all out in the open. If a second board member says, yes, put that on, that'd be great for step one. And then step two, if the board member requesting could email both Lisa and I with the suggested like language for that agenda item, like how would you like it to show up on the agenda? And then if there's any supporting information for that, if that can be sent prior to noon on the Friday, before packets and that sort of thing goes out, so.
It's just helpful to have the background when you're discussing an agenda and people are on the same page. So, all right. Good. All right, anything else on the future?
Is there a direction in terms of building inspection, or?
And you said the current arrangement is he gets paid per inspection, he's a subcontractor, is that?
Well, he gets paid per inspection. I would defer to Lisa and or Deb in terms of how the payment is calculated. I just want to know, is there a direction to do anything, or do you want to talk about it at the next meeting?
We should at least talk about it. I mean, if there's a better alternative or something, it's worth looking into. I mean, I don't know. And typically, we look at how other municipalities do it too, so we've got some example to go by. But other than that, again, we're good. Okay.
And then also for clarification too, Jack as village president is the only exception to that rule, so Jack can put anything on an agenda. It's just other board members need a second, so.
All right. Anything else on future agenda? If not, okay. All right. We still need to have a short closed session here, so at this point, I'll make a motion. The Village of Cottage Grove Village Board will enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 1985, Parent 1, Parent E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Discuss property negotiations for parcels listed here, which are basically the former lift station on Vilas Road. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. We need a roll call vote. I'll let Lisa do that.
Conrad?
Aye.
Elmore?
Aye.
Henrik?
Aye.
Limber?
Aye.
Russell?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Okay, we're in closed session. We can take